Reach over and feel the warmth in the room around you right now. The air is heated. The windows are sealed. The door is closed against the night. You did not earn this warmth tonight. You inherited it. But there was a first winter. A first time a human being stood under a falling temperature with no walls, no stored fire, and no one who had ever done this before. And the image you have in your head of that moment is almost certainly wrong. Because the lone survivor, the rugged individual who outlasted the cold on grit alone, never existed. For 300,000 years, winter asked our species a single brutal question. And the answer was never one person. The answer was always us. Let me show you why. Start with the problem, because the problem is your body. You are a tropical animal. Everything about you was built for heat. You have almost no fur. You carry thin layers of fat compared to the animals that share the cold with you. A seal has blubber. A bear has a winter coat, a den, and a heartbeat that slows to almost nothing for months. You have none of that. Drop a naked human into a freezing night, and the math is merciless. Your core temperature sits around 37 degrees Celsius. It only has to fall below 35 before shivering takes over and your hands stop working. Below 32, your judgment fails and you can no longer help yourself. Below 28, the heart begins to give out. Severe hypothermia can kill in hours. In deep cold and wind, in minutes. We were never equipped to face winter the way the animals around us were. We were equipped with something else. And here is the first thing the survival shows get wrong. They show you a single figure hunched over a small fire, teeth chattering, making it through the night by sheer will. But a single human and a single fire is a system that fails. Fire does not tend itself. It burns down while you sleep. It dies in wind and rain. It needs fuel gathered faster than it consumes, all day, every day, through months when the wood is buried under snow. One person cannot sleep and feed a fire at the same time. One person cannot gather fuel and guard against what the cold drives toward the light. The fire that kept ancient humans alive was never one person's fire. It was a watch. Someone slept while someone else fed the flames. The warmth was shared, and so was the work of keeping it. The shelter worked the same way. A wall of hide and branch and packed earth is not built by one pair of hands in a day. It is built by many, and it is repaired constantly, because winter tears at it without stopping. But the real shelter was never the structure. It was the bodies inside it. Pressed together through the worst hours, ancient humans became each other's heat. Your body throws off warmth every moment, roughly the output of a small lamp, around 100 watts at rest. Alone, that warmth vanishes into the dark. Packed into a shelter with others, that warmth pools. It becomes survivable. The simplest survival technology our ancestors ever had was not the spear or the flame. It was another human being lying close enough to share their heat. Then came clothing, and clothing tells you everything about how cooperative survival really was. A draped hide is not enough for a true winter. What kept people alive was tailored, layered clothing, fitted to the body, sewn tight enough to trap warm air against the skin. And to sew, you need a needle. The oldest dyed sewing needles we have found are over 40,000 years old, carved from bone with a hole drilled through one end. Think about what that means. Someone had to scrape and soften the hides. Someone had to cut them to shape. Someone had to spend hours stitching them with sinew thread through a hole the width of a few human hairs. The jacket that saved a life in January was the work of many hands in autumn. Even staying dressed against the cold was a group project. Then there was food, and food in winter is a different kind of terror. Nothing grows. The plants are dead or buried. The animals are scattered, lean, and hard to find. For months, the land gives you almost nothing, and you cannot simply go and gather your next meal. This is where one of the deepest survival skills was hiding. Storage. Ancient humans did not survive winter in winter. They survived it in autumn. Across the cold regions of the ancient world, people dried meat, rendered fat, and cached food in pits dug into ground cold enough to freeze it solid. Permafrost became a natural refrigerator. Surplus from the good months was the only thing standing between a group and starvation in the bad ones. And here is the part that matters. You cannot store enough food for a winter by yourself. The hunt that fills a storage pit takes many hands. The work of preserving it before it rots takes many more. A lone human in autumn cannot gather a winter. A group can. We are not guessing at this. The last people on Earth to live this way showed us directly. In Tierra del Fuego, at the frozen tip of South America, the Yagan people survived bitter, wet cold for thousands of years. When Europeans arrived, they were stunned to find them lightly clothed, and assumed they were simply tough. They were missing the real answer. The Yagan kept fires burning almost constantly, in their shelters and even in their canoes, tended in turns. They lived pressed close in family groups. Their survival was not individual hardiness. It was a continuous, shared system of warmth that never depended on one person. Strip any single member away from the group, and that person's odds collapsed. So look at what winter actually demanded. A fire tended in shifts through the night. A shelter built and rebuilt by many. Bodies pressed together for warmth. Clothing that took a season of skilled hands to make. A store of food that took an entire group an entire season to gather and preserve. Knowledge of where the cold came from and when, carried by the old and passed to the young who had not yet survived it. Every single one of these is something no individual could do alone. Winter did not reward the strongest person. It rewarded the most connected group. The cold was not survived by toughness. It was survived by cooperation so total that the modern idea of the lone survivor would have been a death sentence. And that is the twist hiding inside the question. How did ancient humans survive their first winters alone? They did not. There was no alone. The human who wandered off, who was cast out, who was separated from the group when the temperature fell, did not become a legend. They became a body in the snow. For 300,000 years, isolation in winter was not freedom. It was the most dangerous condition a human could be in. To be alone in the cold was to be already dying. To be held by a group was the only version of survival that ever existed. Here is the part that should unsettle you. Your body still believes this. When you are cold and frightened, you do not want to be alone. You want to be near other people. You feel the pull toward warmth and company because every ancestor who did not feel that pull walked off into the dark and left no descendants. The need to huddle, to gather, to not face the cold by yourself, is not weakness. It is a 300,000-year-old survival instinct still running inside you. It kept your bloodline alive through every winter that came before this one. And now think about how we live. We have built a world where you can be perfectly warm and perfectly alone at the same time. A heated room, a sealed door, a winter night faced entirely by yourself, and you will not die. For the first time in the history of our species, isolation in the cold is survivable. We treat this as progress, and in many ways it is. But something is quietly missing from it. The warmth our ancestors knew was never just temperature. It was the press of other bodies, the shared watch, the knowledge that the cold was something you faced together or not at all. We engineered away the danger of being alone in winter. We did not engineer away the part of us that still aches in the cold for someone close. So go back to the warm room you are sitting in. Feel the heat again. It is a miracle your ancestors could not have imagined, achieved at a scale they could not have dreamed. But remember what it replaced. For 300,000 years, warmth meant each other. Every winter our species survived. It survived as a group, holding a fire through the night, sharing the heat of crowded bodies, living on food and wearing clothing that many hands had made and saved. You did not survive your first winter alone. No one ever did. You are here because, in the deepest cold the world could throw at us, enough people refuse to face it by themselves. And maybe, in the warmth you take for granted tonight, that is the one thing worth remembering.